We are right at noon, so let's go ahead and call this meeting to order. And before we begin, I would like to welcome this month's Leadership Development Program participants that are with us today. Thank you very much for being here. If you would please, I'd like for each of you to stand up and introduce yourself. Tell us where you work within KUB and how many years you've worked for us.
I'm Dwayne Bledsoe. Work for underground construction. I've been here 24 years at KUB.
Anna Freshour. I've been here about 4.5 years full-time. Prior to that, I was a student. I'm in customer technical services as a customer counselor.
I'm Leslie Glover. I work in safety and regulatory services. I've been with KUB for about 14 years.
Tim Kelly. I'm an engineer in gas systems engineering, and I've been at KUB for 7 years.
My name is Tommy Lawhorn. I'm an engineer in water systems engineering, and I've been with KUB for about 2.5 years now.
Eric Sharp. I'm in the accounting department. I've been here 5 years.
I'm Bill Warren. I'm in the service department, and I've been with KUB about 5.5 years.
Well, again, thank you all so much for joining us today. We are happy to have you. Mr. Coley, if you would note that all commissioners are here with the exception of Commissioner Small and Commissioner, sorry, I just went completely blank. Pennell, she is absent due to illness, and with everything going on, Commissioner Small just isn't able to join us today unexpectedly. So thank the rest of you all for being here. First thing on our agenda is our approval of the minutes from February 20th. Those minutes were mailed to each of you, so I will take either a motion second for approval or any corrections if anyone may have them.
So moved.
Second. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. We'll move on to our official action for today. First on our agenda is Resolution 1410, a resolution authorizing the execution of an agreement to amend Power Contract TV-7511 or 110A and to become a participant in TVA's Green Invest program. Okay?
I'm moving over here. Sorry, I slid over here on you.
You snuck up on me.
I'm not very quiet, but that is good. Commissioners, I do want to spend some time to talk about the long-term partnership in Resolution 1410. As you know, last summer, TVA approached us about a long-term commitment and agreement, and we've spent a lot of time over the last 7 months reviewing that thoroughly, doing our due diligence, and in the presentation, I'm going to recommend that we are authorized to sign that contract. Before I do that, I want to go into a lot of detail about it. So on this slide, a lot of the key provisions of that contract. First of all, it does move us from a 5-year contract to a 20-year contract that renews every year. So it's a perpetual renewal contract for 20 years. As part of that agreement, you do get a 3.1% credit on our wholesale bill. I'll talk a lot of detail about what that means and what the amount of dollars it entails, so I'll get to that in a little bit. It does allow for a 5% flexibility of generation. As you know, today our contracts allow it to have no generation on our system. We do ourselves. So this does allow for a 5% generation that we can build ourselves, and we'll talk about that in length later on in the presentation. It does limit TVA's rate increases. They actually put in a rate increase cap in this provision so that can protect us and our customers as far as unplanned rate increases or big, large rate increases. But next is a deeper engagement by TVA. This is a true agreement. It is meant to be a partnership, hence in the title. And the idea is that we will be more involved in TVA's planning, programs, rates, what they do in the future. All those things are very important. So this is more of an open transparency between the two groups, between us as LPCs and TVA as a generator. And lastly, there are protections in this contract. If TVA was ever sold, and while that may never happen, every president that ever gets into office at some point puts on their agenda that we want to look at TVA being privatized. It never happens, but in case it ever does, we have protections in place that allow us to go back to our current contract if that was ever happen in the future. So those are all the kind of highlights of what's in there. This is a map of the TVA Valley, of all 154 utilities that are served by TVA. Those shown in blue have signed the contract. There are 137 of those utilities that have signed the contract. Of the 5 largest municipalities, Chattanooga, Huntsville, and Nashville have all signed. Memphis is doing a comprehensive study about options, and they'll be working on that for the next little bit. And they'll make a decision at that point what their future looks like, but that's, for the 5 big munis, that's where they all stand. The ones in gray, obviously, the ones that are looking, they're doing their due diligence and deciding what they're going to do in the future as far as they're signing the agreement or not. So I want to go into some of the details. As I mentioned earlier, we did a lot of work. We read that thing thoroughly, up and down, inside out, and backwards, to make sure we understood what we were signing up for. And in there are some things that we were concerned about. I'll talk about each of those areas. There was a section in the contract that when we read it, we interpreted as it could affect our sales of natural gas, our programs we roll out. And so that was one concern. The next one was, there was some language that could have made us or encouraged us to find out what's going on behind the meter, or what people build their own solar. Something we have never really taken a strong action either way in. If people want to do that, that's their choice. The other thing was the rate protections stopped at the end of the first 20 years and didn't go further. Even though the contract renews itself, the rate protections weren't there. Then lastly, if you do give notice, it was kind of vague on what was that to look like. And so we asked for some clarification on that. In fact, we engaged our friends at Chattanooga and Huntsville. We actually had a really good meeting with TVA leadership and said basically this is how we read it. Of course, TVA said that wasn't their intent. We probably knew that was the case, but it does read that way, and they agreed it does read. It could be interpreted that way, and chose to strike all that language out of there. And so all those 4 points are no longer concerned. Those were all taken out of the contract, and the version we have today does not have those things are not part of that language, and so that's been eliminated. And I appreciate TVA's willingness to listen and change it. We also heard a lot from our customers, the public, and we always take those information very seriously. There were some concerns. We've had them written to us, verbally told to us about the concerns they had about this contract. And so I want to address each of those very important and very specifically because there are valid concerns and we want to make sure we address them and what's in there. One of the areas we heard was the contract length diminishes our influence on TVA. By signing up to a longer deal, you have less voice to speak. Second one was the 3.1% credit was too small. It was insignificant. It doesn't matter. It's not a lot of dollars, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And then the 5% was too small of a number for as far as flexibility to do generation. They need to be a lot larger number, that we need to be doing more solar, more wind, more renewables in our portfolio. And so we looked at each of these very seriously, took them into consideration, and and we want to respond to each of these individually. So, and we talked about length of contract. The 2 areas that were concerning were TVA responsiveness, which I meant, and then if you wanted to get power from outside TVA, could you? So let me hit both those pretty thoroughly. We have looked at that, and you know where we live. We're in East Tennessee. Mountains to the east, plateau to the west, mountains to the north and south. Getting a source of power from anywhere else is, I would say, virtually impossible, pretty dang close to impossible. There's no way to get a good source of power generation across the valley to us. Part 2 of that is that there's a TVA fence. It was created by federal law, by Congress. It basically says TVA has to stay inside its own border and others can't go in and out, vice versa. And when we talk to our peers out there that haven't signed and looking at other options, they're not pursuing that fence to be removed. They're looking at options to build their own generation and serve across the wall, if you will call it that. And so that just told us even more that that's less of the fence ever coming down, is what I'll say to that. And as part of the part about us having less influence, actually that's the opposite. TVA has actually started partnership meetings. They had one today and yesterday that we want to be a part of at some point, and where they're actually showing what's under the hood. They're talking about what they're doing. They're showing their rates. They're showing their cost structure. They're showing what their plans are. And the idea is for us to have input into that process. And so it's actually more transparent than it's ever been going forward. So I would say that's obvious that that's the direction they're headed. As far as the wholesale rate contract amount, 3.1%. While it doesn't sound like a small number, it is a large amount of dollars. It's $9.5 million annually that would come back into our system. That could fund lots of programs. And I listed the obvious ones here. Obviously, it could help our reliability programs by funding them further, which is a big, reliability is huge for us and will always continue to be a big point for us. Deferral or elimination of rate increases. That affects all of our customers directly. Affordability is a big factor for us. We talk about it a lot. Low income assistance programs. We've had a lot of success with Rounded Up, with Home Uplift, it could fund more of that and we'll be able to do more homes with those dollars. And lastly, environmental programs. As you know, the city has set sustainability goals. We have always said we want to be greener and cleaner. TVA is committed to that. So some dollars could be used for those type of programs also. And so those are some of the things we were looking to earmark with those about $9.5 million. We'll talk about some of that in a little bit here. And then flexibility for renewables, so 5%. It is better than zero. Is it enough? Well, TVA, when they put that in there, what they were talking about was you building your own generation, your own system without TVA's involvement. Well, TVA has come up with some new programs that will actually address that and give us more flexibility. It's actually not the ceiling, it's the floor of the renewables and that such. So there are new options out there, and as we've talked about over the last few weeks, there's been examples of like when Google and Facebook came to the Valley, part of the deal was to get solar. They wanted solar as their source of power, and TVA worked out an agreement with them. Since then, Nashville and Vanderbilt have cut a deal for 35 megawatts. That basically powers 80% of Vanderbilt's campus with solar. And so we said, hey, we kind of want to see what that's about. Let's show us something like that for our system. And TVA brought to us a neat opportunity to allow us to buy into some renewables at the tune of $825,000. And so we're going to propose that of that $9.5 million, $825,000 of it goes to these renewable programs. What they call that is the Green Invest program. It's the first of its kind in the Valley. It's very new. And that was at $825,000. We'll be able to purchase 212 megawatts of solar, new to the Valley, new to TVA. And that will be assigned to us. That will be enough to provide 465 kilowatt hours of power, which is the equivalent of 35,000 residential homes, or 8% of our system. That 8% does not count towards that 5%, obviously. It actually is above and beyond the 5%. And so we still have that set aside for us to do generation if we want to. What it also allows us to do, we've talked about a community solar project. We're still working on that. The details are being hammered out. If we do that project, that will not count towards the 5%. So my point to all this is there are other options for us to become more renewable and help the city meet their goals. And TVA is really open and flexible to do those kind of things. And so we're really excited about that. And so my last slide is just, with all this work we've been doing, all the negotiating, if you want to call that, with TVA to hammer out some of the language, we think this is the best interest of our customers. We've listened to our folks internally, we've listened to our customers and the public, and we can do a lot of things with that $9.5 million. And so Resolution 1410 states that we want to agree to allow KUB to sign this long-term partnership agreement, and Part 2 to set aside those dollars to fund the Green Invest program so we can purchase some solar in the Valley. Take any questions that you may have. Before I do that, I want to say thanks. Jeff Lash, President and CEO of TVA, is here. I want to say thank you for our conversations and working through this agreement, and I appreciate that very much. But I look to the board to any questions you may have about this contract or agreement.
Okay. What's the timing, if we know of the, at this point, of the $825,000 for the solar investment?
So the way that works is if we sign on, they have to get it built. And so that won't start till it's finished. And so we're looking at 2022, 2023 at the earliest. And no, you don't pay until it's finished. We do sign on, we're committed to it. But it doesn't happen until they get the solar arrays up and functional. And so that's what that is. And what I failed to mention is we thought this was a $1.1 million project. Now it's an $825,000 project. TVA was able to negotiate on our behalf a lower price for the same size solar array. And so that's good news. It's actually that's a huge savings for us. And so that's a big part of that too.
Just to clarify,
Yep.
a lot of this is a practical decision for us, as much as we all have concerns about green power, that kind of thing.
Yep.
And we have some flexibility that we didn't have to use alternative sources, which is a good thing. But at the end of the day, the biggest consideration is we don't have any other choices in terms of how we get the fence that you referred to is a figurative fence that keeps TVA from going out across the fence to sell their power to others, and it keeps others from coming in here. So that's first, and then you've got mountains. So even if we could do it, the expense of doing that. So if I understand, you're recommending that we, since we don't have a lot of other options anyway, that we go ahead and take advantage of the cost savings that we can pass on to our ratepayers and perhaps do some other really important work that has been a priority for many members of this board.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, those are all those factors are definitely in play. Us not signing it reduces our influence. You know, if you're one of the ones that aren't signing it, you're just losing the credit and having no discussions with your source. That's another factor in there too. But yeah, since we looked at it, we actually did some quick, just if we could get power to Knoxville somewhere else. It's in the millions. It's not the millions. It's not. We actually, you know, we did some vetting there just to make sure we're not crazy.
You know, Gabe, one of the things that I've thought about with regard to this contract, really and truly, is the give and take that went into the final product. Because in my legal experience, when you've got sort of an industry titan, there's not a lot of give and take. And I really appreciate TVA's willingness to talk about things rather than just sort of put it in a take or leave stance. And I really think a new day is dawning where we all collaborate more than we're adversarial to one another. And I think by those collaborations, and we've seen it in the past with Home Uplift and programs like that with TVA, by collaborating, I think we accomplish a lot more for our customers and the Valley than we do by not doing that.
I agree. That's what I see day to day.
Just a point of clarification.
Yes.
The other distributors who have not signed
Yes.
and who are maybe in negotiations, if they are able to acquire a significant contract change, our contract will change also. Is that my understanding?
That's a good question. Yeah, I'll use the term that I've used. It's called a favored nation status. If there was a significant change to the contract, all those who have signed get the same deal. So a good point is, when we got that negotiated that language out about the concerns we had about that one section, everybody got that exact verbiage the next day, basically. They all got, all the 134 at the time had signed and got that same change. And so there is that in place. So if it's such that TVA changes the deal a little bit better for everybody else, we'd instantly get that same deal. That is a great point. And, that is something that's new in this agreement that we've never quite had in the past.
So we don't lose anything by signing it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions?
I just wanted to comment on the slide here, and that is the majority of those that are in the gray are on the border.
Yep, that is correct.
So to reinforce the fact that they may have some other options that we don't have.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. The majority of those are touching another quote supplier or generator, and I look at their options, and I don't know where they stand and all that. That is a fact. Yeah. The exception being Murfreesboro, Middle Tennessee, and they've got other things they're working on internally.
And then volunteer that runs.
Yeah, volunteer.
That's
Actually, touch two states. Long system.
Well, I think, I'll just say, I came in as one of the main skeptics. And I've been heartened by TVA's willingness to actually negotiate in good faith. And my hat's off to Mr. Lash and his team for doing that. It just, to me, I think the fact that we took the time to study and negotiate is good stewardship on behalf of our ratepayers. And so my hat's off to our staff for doing the hard work. It would have been real easy to just say, take the money and run. It would have been real easy to lock us into some things that long after we're gone would be a problem. So compromise is always the name of the game, but I have moved from deep skepticism to support.
I'll just say too, And I want to echo what Jerry said on behalf of everybody on the board. We are so grateful to staff for all the time and effort and all the research that you all have done. We know it's taken a lot of time, and you all have given us good information and have done a whole lot of work to get that for us. So thank you all for that. So if there are no other comments or questions, we need a motion and a second on Resolution 1410. This will be first and final reading.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have some members of the public who have indicated that they would like to address the board on this resolution. Each visitor, each speaker will have 5 minutes to make your comments. When there's 1 minute remaining, the yellow light on the podium will go on, and then when your time is up, the red light will go on. The first person that has signed up is Mr. Kent Minot, and when you go to the podium, if you would state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, good day, Commissioners. I'm Kent Minot. I live at 311 West Glenwood Avenue. And in previous sessions, you've seen me stand here and urge you, don't sign this contract. And today, the Sierra Club retains a number of objections to a long-term association with TVA, but what we're seeing here today, and by the way, my real first purpose in being here is just to say thank you to CEO Gabe Bolus and to Mike Boland for the huge amount of time you've accorded us, not just the Sierra Club, but SEED and NAACP, in discussing this contract in deep detail. You basically gave your morning to the environmental justice movement here, and I really, really appreciate that. And I've also discussed the remarks I'm making here today with other activists in the Sierra Club around the state, and I'm basically saying, well, not that it ultimately makes that much difference, but we're stepping back from our opposition to the contract. And I think that this Green Invest solar project is a big reason why, and also that amount of money from the savings that can be dedicated to future projects that could be community solar projects that could be structured to help low-income residents, the amount of money that can be put into furthering energy efficiency upgrades, which we have a 3,000 person waiting list for. All of those things make me say, do it, go ahead and sign the damn thing, and let's get busy creating this, because in terms of deployment of renewable energy, our region is behind the rest of the country, and the rest of the country is behind the rest of the world, and the rest of the world's pretty darn late anyway. So we really need to get busy, and recent weather events are a reminder of what the climate crisis can do to us. So we've got to clean up our energy system, and the Sierra Club's goal in this advocacy is that TVA be a green utility by 2050. That's a steep lift. But this is a big step. Our advocacy in the past has felt like beating our heads against a brick wall. And today there's a big breach in that wall, and I think we should move through it. And as we move through it, we should look for further goals. TVA doesn't have any net metering, no solar incentives. The actual percentage of genuine renewables is really low. The current IRP says they plan to put as much as 17 gigawatts of gas in place. That's a fossil fuel, a climate destroyer. So we got work to do. But this gives us a way to do that work, and I salute the leadership of KUB here for giving us a really good start. Thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you.
Next on the list is Stan Johnson.
Good afternoon. My name is Stan Johnson. I live at 2805 Woodbine Avenue, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37914. My biggest concern about this is how much percentage of this money is going to go and impact low-income communities. We have had a burden in our low-income communities for a long time here in Knoxville. We see these homes all the time. I live on Woodbine, like I said, most of our homes were built before the 1940s. You guys have seen how much money that you're going to get back in a rebate. We don't normally see that money. One of the things I want to talk about is make sure that there's a percentage, and how does that percentage go back into that community, and how do we tell that community that's actually happening? We don't engage our community well. Matter of fact, in the hood, I'll tell you guys, just like I tell Gabe, in the hood we call it KUB, keep you broke, right? And that means something. If you're already broke and you got a company keeping you broke, now we got money to go back into those communities. I want to make sure that that's heartfelt, and that this money can go back and help these people at least become affordable utility payers as well. Other part I want to talk about is, let's make this equitable, right? Let's talk about how this has not always been an equitable process. KUB and TVA, you guys work together, but by the time we get to the hood keeps looking at you guys as the same thing. So when you come to KUB, you say, well, it's TVA's fault. Come to TVA, you say it's KUB's fault. So we got to stop all that. I want to be able to work with you guys. I want to make sure that this information is clear. It's very inclusive. It's very engaging, because we do not have that much community engagement processes, right? We have 3,000 people on a waiting list, that if everybody stays on that waiting list, that's 30 years till that other person gets their homes weatherized. Again, a home uplift, the Rounded Up program, great programs, is not enough. We have to make sure that these things are funded. We have to make sure that these things are actually hitting the people that's hurting the most. All this pollution, all this stuff that we're talking about, all this stuff that even happened in Nashville and all the way through, I guarantee you the lowest income people are gonna have the burden the most, right? We have to start thinking about those people in a way that's equitable. Not all of our ratepayers need to be treated the same. I'm not saying that. Equitable. The people that's getting the most burden needs the most help, right? Again, let's just think about how do we engage those people in that process, right? And how do we make sure that these people in our community, and I'm not just talking about in East Knoxville, I'm talking about Vestal as well, right? Let's make sure that these people are getting a fair shake, and make sure that we're doing the right thing by these people that's gonna benefit the most by this thing. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. We appreciate your comment. Next is Maggie Shelper.
All right, I'm Maggie Schober. I'm at 2511 East 5th Avenue, and I'm here on behalf of myself, and I also work at the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. So I am encouraged that KUB has heard the demands of customers and Knoxville voters and is pursuing some solar to both, reduce costs and address emissions. Similar to some other comments this afternoon, I still have some concerns about the multi-decade self-renewing contract. Some have been addressed, some still linger. First is losing leverage, and also the fact that there's no hurry to sign. This contract is not going anywhere. We heard from and others have heard from KUB that they were going to wait until after the Memphis process played itself out before considering this contract. But now here we are, after the public has had only 4 days to consider both of these contracts and review them, the actual contract language. So we're concerned that this process has been rushed and not as transparent as it should be for the level of decision that this is. So if KUB can secure solar under the terms that were presented here, we think this is a good starting point for clean and inexpensive renewables for KUB and others across TVA. There were a few things in the letter from Gabe that was in the agenda and were also in his presentation here that I thought were a little bit misleading, and I'd like to clear them up, particularly on the flexibility carve-out. We hear a lot that it's 5% of power, when in reality, the way TVA has defined it is 5% of KUB's average hourly capacity over the last 5 years. For KUB, this comes out, our estimates show that this comes out to about 32 megawatts. And if KUB uses local solar for that through net metering or larger resources that they procure themselves, this would meet only about 1% of KUB's load. So that 5% is really a 1% if you're looking at the actual megawatt hours that you're getting out of it. And 32 megawatts might seem like a lot now, but this is a long-term contract. TVA has made promises that this 5% capacity is a floor, not a ceiling, but there's no language in the contract itself about how to update the flexibility program terms. So if I were voting on a contract, I would go by what's actually stated in the contract itself, and not what could be empty promises in the future. A couple other points. The limitation on TVA's rate increases only applies to wholesale rates. So our understanding is that the grid access charge is not included in that. So you're not protected from future increases in the grid access charge, let alone what happens with the fuel charges. Under this new contract, if KUB does decide to leave TVA, they would now be vulnerable to pay for stranded assets, whereas that clause was deliberately removed from, excuse me, from KUB's existing contracts and other LPC contracts a few decades ago. And I feel that the letter and presentation do downplay the very real possibility that one or more of the larger LPCs could leave TVA, and how that would impact both KUB and other LPCs. And I think that you guys need to take that under very serious consideration today and in the future. So all in all, we appreciate the effort that KUB has made to make the best of what we think is a pretty bad situation that TVA has put them in. We caution against moving so quickly for such a major decision. And if KUB does sign the contract, we would hope that they would have a transparent process and be open to public input on how to spend the remaining rate credit. This is an opportunity for KUB to begin really investing in more so in lowering customer bills through homegrown energy efficiency. I also have a letter for you guys so that some of these are in writing for you to refer to later. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the list is Aaron Gill.
Hi, and good afternoon. Thank you for having me here and speaking in support of the decision you have in front of you today. My name is Aaron Gill. I serve at 400 Main Street, downtown in the city of Knoxville. I'm the Chief Policy Officer for Mayor India Kincannon, and got to work with KUB for many years prior to that as Sustainability Director. So I've had the pleasure of partnering with you all in the environmental initiatives and leadership that you have shown in helping us reduce Knoxville's carbon footprint. The leadership and commitment of KUB to your customers and your commitment to environmental stewardship is on display in the approach that you took to evaluating this long-term contract. Thank you to the staff and also to the board for not jumping quickly into it. I think like many of us here today, we had concerns when it was first proposed, and I really appreciate that KUB took the time to dig into the nuance of the proposed contract and negotiate in good faith with TVA to protect the long-term interests of the Knoxville community. So thank you for that. As many of you know as well, Knoxville adopted last year with City Council bold new goals to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions 50% by 2030 for city operations, and we are well on our way toward that goal, as well as the harder goal, which is 80% by 2050 for the Knoxville community, and both of those are relative to a 2005 baseline. The goals respond not only to the climate crisis itself, but as many of you know, also the concern of our constituencies and our ratepayers who we serve, and those of who elected our mayor to be in office to really respond boldly and with urgency to the climate crisis. So we appreciate that KUB is on our side as we address that. KUB and TVA will both be critical partners in figuring out whether we can actually meet that goal. So I'm very glad to have you at our side with that. We are really impressed by the role that TVA has already played in helping us achieve the progress we've made in both city operations as well as the community as a whole. The improvements that they've made to their carbon emission rate have been a main driver of the progress we've seen at the community level already. And the forecast that they have for their carbon intensity for the end of 2020 and 2030 allow me to stand here today and say that I'm not worried that TVA is going to hold us back. I think that they are very firmly on the right track. The question is, of course, how can we partner to even further accelerate progress? And looking ahead toward TVA's plans gives me great hope. And it's always the question that I've had with TVA officials of how can we help you do this faster? And the long-term contract gives us a very strong and firm platform for which we can have those conversations and embark on those partnerships. First of those partnerships is the Green Invest commitment, and truly, this is what leadership looks like. This is going to be huge news. We are going to help you amplify it on both a regional and national network, because when a municipal utility steps up to buy 212 megawatts of solar, that is a huge deal. So thank you for evaluating that opportunity and for KUB or to TVA for offering it. And we're excited to help showcase how KUB is firmly in a leadership spotlight as we make large-scale investments to accelerate a large carbon energy grid. As others have referenced to, we're also very excited that this partnership will open doors for additional support for low-income energy efficiency and to help reduce energy burden, especially for those most financially vulnerable in our community. It is a very real challenge, and when we look at it from the city perspective, it very much compounds the challenges around housing affordability and homelessness prevention. And so to that end, we're excited to continue in conversations with KUB about how this credit can be used to support the great work of Home Uplift and Round It Up, which you all have been leaders in as well. So we appreciate continuing those conversations to consider how we can expand those efforts. So in summary, thank you for your thoughtful approach to the contract negotiation and the use of the wholesale credit, and we're very supportive and look forward to working with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on our list is Mr. Jeff Lyash.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Jeff Lyash. I'm the President and CEO of the Tennessee Valley Authority, and I'm very pleased to be with you here today. I'd like to just make a couple of remarks about this contract and this project, and maybe respond to a couple of the issues raised by, very effectively raised by some of the prior speakers, just for context. I think I would start out by reflecting that we are all part of something very unique here. This Tennessee Valley public power model is a model that doesn't exist anywhere else. At its heart is partnership. That's where the power is. Neither Gabe nor I wake up in the morning worried about a shareholder or an earnings call or growing our market share. We really wake up every morning worried about 10 million people in the Tennessee Valley and the people here in Knoxville. And while a lot of companies say their focus is on their customer, their focus is also on their shareholder. They're one and the same for us. So the notion that TVA and KUB should be partnered closely together to meet the goals of the Tennessee Valley and Knoxville shouldn't be novel to us. It is the heart of this business model. It is the strategy that we need to pursue in the future. So to the issue of do you use leverage with a 20-year contract, I view that entirely differently. This cements a partnership so that we can focus on planning the next 20 years, because that forward look is what it takes to meet the challenges we all face. And this will significantly enhance that partnership. Let me just touch on a couple of streams of value that I think we collectively provide together TVA, KUB, and the city of Knoxville, and mention them just for perspective. So TVA's focus is energy, the environment, and economic development. That was the focus 86 years ago when legislation put it in place. That's our mandate. It's still our mandate. And to do that, we have to partner with 154 local power companies across this Tennessee Valley footprint. We act on that, in my view, by delivering 6 things up under that. The first is price. Energy at the lowest affordable price. This is important because energy affects the quality of people's lives. It is a burden for some in our community more than others, and maintaining that price low is imperative. And together, TVA and our local power companies, TVA and KUB, today provide electricity at prices lower than 70% of the utilities in the United States. That's important for the people. It's also important for our economy. Second is reliability, because low-priced power that's unreliable is not of value to people. TVA's transmission system operates at 99.999% reliability, high reliability, and when paired with KUB's system, this delivers reliable power to the people who live here. The third is environmental value. This has always been important, and as a couple of speakers point out today, it becomes more and more important and more challenging. So to that end, TVA has been effective at reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. If we use the 2005 benchmark, by the end of this year, our objective is to have reduced our CO2 emissions by 60%, 60%. And we're on track to get there. Very challenging, but we're on track. Looking forward, we have line of sight on how to reduce that carbon emissions by 70% by 2030, and we're looking to 80% by 2040. This is an execution plan that we have line of sight on that's important, because many other utilities are aspiring to do what we in the Valley have already done in terms of driving our CO2 intensity down. But we have to look beyond that. That last 20% reduction in CO2 becomes increasingly more difficult. And in order to develop the technologies and the business models to do that in post-2040, we have to begin working on that today. So, energy, reliability, the environment. We also focus on economic development. And our economic development efforts attract billions of dollars of capital to the Valley and hundreds of thousands of jobs every year. We don't do this ourselves. We do this partnered with LPCs like KUB, with communities like Knoxville, with economic development professionals across the state. And the stronger our partnerships, the more effective we are at economic development. And those first 3, price, environmental stewardship, and reliability, make no mistake, those are huge economic development advantages in attracting business. More so as businesses become increasingly sensitive to those things.
Ms. Flash,
yes,
I am sorry to interrupt you, but that is your 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much for the time then.
Thank you for coming to see us.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to answer questions now or later for the council.
Thank you so much. And this is a very important vote for this board. So after our public comments, before we move to take a vote, I want to ask if anyone else has any other questions or comments that they'd like to report. All right, Mr. Foley, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Askew.
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Herbert.
Aye.
Commissioner Simpson Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Worden.
Aye.
Resolution 1410 is passed.
All right, next on our agenda is our president's report. Gabe?
Yes. Commissioners, we are routinely recognized by national organizations for award-winning operations at our utility. I'm happy to say that that tradition is continuing. I want to introduce John Johnson, Manager of Plants, an award 2 awards we received recently from the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, otherwise known as NACWA.
Mr. Coles. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today I want to update you on a couple of National Environmental Achievement Awards awarded to KUB by the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. So the National Association of Clean Water Agencies, or NACWA, is the nation's leader in legislative, regulatory, and clean water advocacy. KUB's been a member since 1990, and we utilize that organization for peer-to-peer relationships and technical resources. In December, KUB received 2 awards, one in public information and education and one in workforce development. So of the 300 agencies, 18 were recognized, and KUB was one of 3 that received more than 1 award. So the first award was in public information and education. To be considered for this award, you had to have a readily available publication or video that demonstrated operations and water quality and protection of the water resources. So KUB Communications took a proactive approach, completed a video that was available on kub.org, and I'd like to show you that video now.
The river is the heart of the community and our source of drinking water here in East Tennessee. Nothing is more vital to the community's health, safety, and quality of life than safe water.
The Tennessee River provides over 30 million gallons of water each day for our Martin B. Whitaker water treatment plant. Here, it is treated to provide high-quality drinking water. The water undergoes multiple settling and filtering processes to remove contaminants, and is disinfected and tested rigorously throughout this process to ensure it meets all standards for safe drinking. KUB uses very sensitive monitoring equipment to measure substances so small they cannot be seen by the human eye alone. The water is also treated as part of KUB's corrosion control program to protect the pipes in KUB's water system and to prevent lead or other metals from leaching out of home plumbing systems.
But our job doesn't stop there. KUB maintains a state-qualified water quality lab, and each day tests the water from homes and businesses from across the system to ensure that we are meeting and exceeding all state and federal requirements.
More than 100,000 tests are performed for over 150 contaminants, far more than are required by state and federal law. KUB is proud of its excellent water quality record and produces an annual water quality report, which is available to the public online.
You use the water to keep you and your family healthy, to keep your household running, and sometimes just for fun. KUB plays an important role in protecting our source water, and you can too.
Please help prevent pollution of our area's streams and rivers. Together, we can ensure that the Tennessee River remains a safe and abundant source for our drinking water. For more information, please visit www.kub.org.
So after the award ceremony, another one of the video awardees came up to us and said, "Wow, where did you get your actors? Those are really good actors." So we were proud to say, those aren't actors. That's a real water treatment plant operator and a lab analyst, so we're pretty proud of those employees. The second award was in workforce development. So the water and wastewater industry is seeing a large exodus of employees through retirements. So this project needed to demonstrate the ability to transfer knowledge between the employees. So Department 83, or plant operations, developed a plant operator qualification program. So this is a year-long intensive study of the treatment plant with hands-on experience and then operator qualifications with more experienced operators. The program was developed in 2013, fully implemented in 2016, and as of the first of the year, we've had 14 operators complete the program, all of which have been here less than 3 years. That's been a very successful program. So with that, these awards will be up here for your viewing. They're very nice. Any questions for me?
No questions, but just want to say congratulations. You all do an excellent job and give us programs that we can really be proud of. So thank you. All right, our April meeting will be the financial session. It will focus on the details of our fiscal 21 budget and an update on our long-range plan, including Proposed rate increases to be considered at the May board meeting. We will begin at a different time. We will begin with a brief business meeting at 10 a.m. Public comments will be welcome before the meeting is adjourned. Following the conclusion of the business meeting, we will begin our budget workshop, and that session will conclude around noon. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the board on any other topics today? No? None have signed up? All right. Then we will, following the adjournment of our meeting, the board will have a lunch session across the hall that is open for the public to observe. So no other business being before the board. The meeting is now adjourned.